systems create value, and our IP is tremendously important at Pets in the City. But without, and I kind of view a business without systems, you've got nothing to sell.
Hey, it's Dave from SYSTEMology. Today we're with Layamon Bakewell from Pets in the City. And perhaps just to start, Layman, if you can maybe introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you guys do and a little bit about the business.
Yeah, hey, thanks, David. Yeah, we are a luxury dog daycare and pet hotel. We've currently got 3 branches in Auckland, franchise-based company, looking to, I guess, start franchising next year. Pets in the City's been around since 2006. I took over as the owner about 14 months ago of the
Yeah.
brand. So we're on the journey to really systemize the business and get ready to grow next year.
So you mentioned the 3 location and how many staff have you got?
So across the 3, there's probably around about 50.
Yeah.
So my wife and I own 2 of the branches, and we've got a licensee operating the 3rd branch. So it's around about 50.
Yeah. Um, Interested to know about the the transition. Like, are you a pets person, or did you think, right, I just want to buy a business where you're not the technician and you don't know how to do things? Like, how did that come about with you kind of taking over the business?
So I did 19 years in the New Zealand Navy, and I was at this, sort of the end of 2019, started 2020. My wife and I, who was also in the Navy, we were like, we want it. It was time to get out. We'd done enough time. And we really wanted to work for ourselves.
Hmm.
That was something that was really important to us. We reviewed hundreds of businesses,
Yes.
the due diligence on dozens of businesses. And one day, I was lying in bed surfing business listings on my phone, and I came across this pet business. And I woke up the wife. I was like, "Wake up! I found it! I found it!" And she was like, "Shut up! Go back to sleep!" And sort of shrugged it off. And the next morning, we talked about it, and we didn't really take it anything any further. And then for the next 2 weeks, we just kept talking about how cool would it be to run a dog daycare. What a crazy like transition from our life in the Navy. Um, and so we reached out to the franchisor at the time, and had lunch, and one thing led to another, and we became actually the first franchisees of the brand. The franchisor was looking to franchise at the time then. So we 9 months later, after that initial lunch, we opened Pets in the City Silverdale, which was the brand's first franchise, right smack back in the middle of a COVID lockdown. So
Wow. Yep.
our fun, sort of exciting entry into business was a little bit less fun than what we were expecting at the time. Yeah,
Yeah. What a baptism of fire. You've
yeah,
made it through the other side. So were they selling at the time? Was it a franchisee that you had bought in at, and then you kind of looked at the business as a whole?
yeah. So what happened was we became franchisees, which was an experience in itself. And I can say when we're selling to future franchisees, I know what it I know what it's like to be on the other side, because it can be quite frustrating. For a whole bunch of reasons. No one's fault. It's just the process that everyone goes through. And so what happened was we took over. We opened the Silverdale branch in September 2020. Um, Initially, I guess one of the frustrations we had was a lack of systems, and it wasn't the franchisor's fault. There was a really, really good franchise system in place, but it lived in 2 ring binders in the corner of an office. Um, and it wasn't at the level. I guess I'd come from a really, really structured, uh, formal environment, being in the New Zealand Defence Force, where we had systems for everything and everything was documented, and we had checklists and SOPs for absolutely everything. And it was a bit of a shock to me to enter a franchise-based business model and to not have that. And it's not that we didn't have it; it was just that it wasn't at the level I expected. So I remember I a lot of my friends got out of the Navy at the same time, and we all kind of went in, and there's about 4 of us that went into business for ourselves. And one of them flicked me a message one day and goes, "You've got to check out this book I've just read." And I was like, "Oh yeah." So jumped on. I know I don't have time to read, I'm too busy, but I jumped on Audible and downloaded SYSTEMology, and I listened to it in a day. I just listened straight through. And it was like a bit of a light bulb moment to go, wow, all this stuff that's been going on in my head about how I want to run this business, but didn't like know how to articulate it as such, um, has been David's written into this book. Awesome. So I found your software and we started the systems journey, and that must have been early 21, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit later, but yeah, sometime around then. And we just got stuck into it. And it was really interesting because we were a franchisee at the time, like it wasn't really our place to be developing systems for the brand and building the brand. Um, but there was just some stuff that we really wanted to do. So fast forward, about 18 months ago, the franchisor actually came and saw me and said, look, I'm keen to get out of the business. I want to do something else. Would you like to buy it? So it was not something that we planned to run a franchise-based pet company, but we saw it as an opportunity that was too good to, pass up. Initially, we were just going to do this dog daycare thing for 12 months and then sounds terrible, but go buy a real business, this was just a
Yeah.
fun thing, bit of a thing on the side. But the opportunity in the pet industry in New Zealand and what we can do, well, and Australia, actually, we eventually want to go into Australia, but the opportunity is just immense, and the opportunity to really professionalize and systemize a business in this industry is just huge, because most businesses in this industry are small mum and dad operations. There's no systems, that they don't have anything written down. It's all in the owner's head. And of course, that's not what we wanted to achieve. So we took over as franchisor October 22, so about 14 months ago. And my primary role this year has been to systemize the business, carry us on that journey, and get ready to franchise again next year. So that's kind of where we're at.
I love hearing these types of stories because we hadn't chatted beforehand, and now a lot of this is really starting to make sense. I think, firstly, coming from your Navy background, I see this time and time again. Anyone who's in any sort of defense force, they instantly get systems and processes because it's like baked into the way that you do things.
Yeah,
And then you're not necessarily the technician, so you're approaching this from day one of let's build this business so it can grow and scale
yeah,
without you doing the dog grooming or looking after the pets
yeah.
or whatever. So, like, you've already ticked two massive boxes. I'm curious what it was about systemology that caught your eye, because you're already a bit of a systems person. I know it was, through the lens now of business, but was there something that kind of spoke to you as you've kind of gone on this journey you can reflect back on?
Um, I think for me, like we've got three philosophies at uh, we've got an overriding philosophy at Pets in the City about keep it simple.
Mhm.
Like it's so easy to overcomplicate things in business, and
Yeah.
by the systemology and the systems hub approach to building systems, one thing that really I guess struck me was um, the whole keep it simple philosophy and don't overcomplicate things. And prior to reading systemology, I think I'd had this idea in my head that this was going to be this massive all-encompassing job, almost like my life's work, where it doesn't need to be like that, because your staff will never get it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've had a look at our CCF, and I've got there, but even that's massively too complex. And I was chatting to, I had a call with one of your staff last week, doing a systems audit, and I, even though I've consciously tried to keep things simple, it's still too complex for my team. Um, so that was something that really struck me. I mean, at the end of the day, what we do is really simple. We take people's dogs, we look after them for the day, we train them, groom them, socialize them, we board them in our hotel if we need to, and then we give them back a happy, healthy dog. In some ways, it doesn't need to be more complicated than that, but it always is, because
Yeah.
complexity creeps in, and if you don't actively fight against complexity, it'll creep in. And the systemology approach, I guess, provides a bit of a framework for not letting complexity creep in.
Yes, yeah. So you've been on the journey for a little while now.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you could say to the earlier layman before you got
Yeah.
where you are today, where you're kind of like, oh, if only I'd known this or that? I mean, obviously, keep it simple is one of them. Is there anything else that you've kind of picked up?
Probably just do it, and,
Yes.
and set time aside every week. I am not a great proponent of using the system. Like, I agree with the concept of using a systems champion, but I'm too much of a I just haven't got there. I want to say I'm too much of a control freak. That's probably a bit extreme, but assigning a systems champion, I'm in the process of doing at the moment, and I think that will really. We've done all the basics quite well, but it's about finishing off the whole package before we go out and start franchising next year. So I'm in the process of appointing a systems champion. That's going to be a big part, and I probably should have done that 6 months ago or 12 months ago. But the other thing is just do it, because once you start writing and generating systems and doing screen recordings and making videos and all that sort of stuff, it's quite quick. But it's so easy for it to never get to the top of your to-do list.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think franchising's a unique one because you really have two businesses as well. You've got the franchisor business,
Yeah.
and then you've got the franchisee business. So there's that extra work, and I often see, like, that's why a lot of franchising companies, like you mentioned before about the franchisor not necessarily having everything the way that you would like it. That's all too common. It's quite surprising because you would think in franchising that that's the first thing that they would do because that's effectively what they're selling.
Yeah.
But how are you tackling this idea of having two businesses effectively that you're needing to systemize?
Um, really, really good question. I'm focusing on, I guess, the day-to-day operations side of the franchisee side of the business, because if we can get that right, everything else becomes easy. Um, I remember I watched the YouTube video you made with the owner of Dog Diggity Daycare.
Jeanette, yes,
Yeah,
Farron?
Jeanette. Yeah, that was massively inspiring. I watched that a long time ago, probably 18 months ago. Um, and so many of the challenges she talked about in that video at the time just struck me like bang. You've got to get that day-to-day operations side of the business going well, and then the rest of it will fall into place. I've had some really good wins with some of the franchise support office systemizing a lot of that,
Yeah.
in terms of systemizing a recruitment process for new franchisees and streamlining that. Used to take me an hour to respond to a new franchisee, to get all the documents or to a franchise inquiry, to get all the documents together I needed, to rewrite the welcome letter. I've streamlined that right down, and just spending a couple of hours in Systems Hub writing a system for how we're going to do this process works really, really well. Some of the other massive wins I've had in terms of that day-to-day operation stuff is I took your advice. I watched another one of your YouTube videos about a year ago about using Asana.
Yep.
So we use Asana for a lot of our checklists and forms, but they're all linked into Systems Hub. So that's something that's worked really, really well for us.
As you've been rolling out, like you mentioned, with getting back to new franchisee inquiries, have there been any other notable wins that you can think about? Like, oh, we were able to improve the onboarding of a new client or staff, or I don't know. Yeah, anything else jump out at you?
Yeah, massively. Probably one of the most important things we do in our business, and I think it was the first system I wrote actually, was how we respond to new customer inquiries. So we Makes me laugh now thinking back at it. But when we opened Pets in the City Silverdale in 2020, we used to manage all our customer inquiries in an Excel spreadsheet. It was like, it's hilarious thinking back on it now, how we could ever do that, because even then we'd get 15 to 20 inquiries a day, and we were managing it in a
Yeah,
spreadsheet. So we managed to formalize our system for how we manage new customer inquiries, and we now use HubSpot quite effectively,
yeah,
um, for that whole CRM process. But we got there by forcing ourselves to sit down and go, right, what does a system look like from the first moment a new inquiry engages with our business to the point that they become a lifetime customer with us. And yeah, that's probably a big one, getting away from Excel spreadsheets and pieces of paper to having a formal process, to take people through that journey. That's probably our biggest one, actually, because until we got that right, you can't scale.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Mm.
sometimes hard for me to articulate or to help the business owner get to a point where they can justify the cost of doing this, because this takes time, effort, and resources. I think with your history in sort of the military, it's or the Navy rather, it's you were able to connect the dots and go, well, I'm going to put some time in on this, and you'll see that ROI. I don't know, yeah, if there's anything that you could suggest that would help someone prioritize this, because there's so many things that have to be done in day-to-day business. Sometimes it's just hard to find space, time, or resources to get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the thing for me is you will always work in the business unless you start systemizing. The only way you'll ever get to the point to consistently be able to work on the business is by putting systems in place. And I'm not completely out of working in the business yet. Um, but 2 days a week I work from home at the moment and work on the business. And I could only get to that point by having really robust systems in place that my team all know and understand. Um,
Mm,
if I hadn't have done it, I'd still be working in the business every single day, and then we can't grow. And it's also not what I'm passionate about. Like I love working in our business, and I love the job, but I'm passionate about growing the brand and working on the business. And yeah, so it's allowed me to do that.
mm, mm.
So sometimes you just got to make that sacrifice. Well, the way I view it is you've got to make that sacrifice up front,
Yeah,
um, of investing the time and effort of getting the systems in place to allow you to step back later.
yeah.
Yeah.
Has there been anything that we can draw on from your experience in the Navy that you've brought over, or new learnings or distinctions around systems and process, whether it's documenting it, whether it's the review process, whether it's like, are there things that you've brought over that you're just like, oh wow, that's actually helped me the way that I think about that?
Um, yeah, I think probably just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Um, it's something I keep coming back to. Keep it simple. Um, and have a review process in place as well. Like we regularly go back and review stuff. And don't if I guess the other thing I've learned is, don't be afraid to try something. If it's wrong, change it
Yeah.
or stop doing it. But we've put a bunch of systems and processes in place at Pets in the City over the last 12 months. And after 3 to 6 months, we've gone, actually, that's pretty crap. That doesn't
Mhm.
work for whatever reason. It takes too long. Let's go back to the old way of doing it. It was better. Just be prepared to that not everything's going to work. And trying to think of an example, but yeah, so not everything's going to work, but that's okay. It's better to try and give it a go. So our philosophy is it's better to always be trying new things and trying to figure out better ways of doing things in the business. It's not always going to work, but sometimes it is, and it's going to work really, really well. So
How do you like get the team to follow process? And maybe this is something that you also learned in the Navy. Like, I'm wondering, you've got once you've got a set of process and it's in place and it's easily accessible, and there's an expectation that you follow process because we have process. Um, is there anything else that needs to happen to get people to follow process, or like what? Yeah, how have you seen tackling that?
Uh, it's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, yeah, and I
Um,
thought you would know. That's I'm a
it's the biggest challenge. Repeat, repeat, repeat.
yes,
Just repeat it in all your communication. So, our key systems are covered in our onboarding process.
yeah,
Um, they're covered in our position training process.
yeah,
Um, and then they're reinforced by me every time I get an opportunity to. I've integrated them into our performance management process.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, and that I've done everything I can possibly think of actually. We've printed them, laminated them up, and they're all over the businesses and they're everywhere for people to read and see. Um, a great idea I heard last week was from one of your team was QR codes. So
yeah.
staff can scan QR codes to get access to the system. So we'll roll that out. I think it's not letting them hide away in this piece of software on the computer. In a business like ours, probably only 20% of the team working on a computer each day. The rest of the team are with dogs. So we've got iPads. They have access to iPads. So if they need to follow a system or they want to read about a system, they can grab an iPad and look it up. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge. Most staff aren't interested in systems. That they're interested in doing their core job.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's just yeah.
With the performance reviews, where did you get the inspiration from that? Was that from the Navy, or is there another? Yeah, actually, maybe tell us a little bit about that.
No, that's definitely from my time in the Navy. So something the New Zealand Defence Force does really, really well is performance reviews. And I was big on building a performance review system that drove the behaviors I wanted in the business.
Yeah,
So we reward people for, I guess, systems thinking and following the systems we have in place. We reward people for the type of leadership behaviors we've embedded into the business as well. Um, and that's all just from my Navy background. Um, yeah, it's really interesting. One thing we talked about, my wife and I talked about a lot, was creating a leadership culture at Pets in the City. Um, but most people in small businesses don't talk about leadership, and
yeah,
it's really interesting when you're chatting to a 21-year-old team leader, or a 23-year-old team leader, and you start chatting to them about leadership, and it's the first time anyone's ever talked to them about leadership. Um, so that's kind of one of the things we've introduced to Pets in the City, and trying to systemize to a point of how we train leadership across the business. Because if we get that right, again, it's everything else becomes pretty easy.
just broad brushstrokes on that. So, is there, like, as far as the cadence is concerned, there's probably an annual component, and you've probably
Yep.
got a quarterly meeting as well.
Yep.
Um, and then there's probably some key structures around what's covered in those meetings and how goals and things are set. I don't know if you could speak to that at all. I just think that, you've really dialed that in.
So, again, it comes back to our philosophy of keep it real simple.
Yep.
So we've got an Asana form that gets sent to our employees quarterly.
Yep.
It's got a bunch of self-evaluation questions, and
Yep.
evaluates them against how they're doing their core job. Um, so self-evaluate them about against how they're doing their core job, and then we've got what I'd call a mini leadership framework that we've developed, plagiarized from the New Zealand Defence Force, but simplified massively for our
Yeah.
industry. So depending on what level an employee is at, they'll get a bunch of leadership questions they need to answer. And again, it's just about driving those types of behaviors we want in the business. They'll submit that form. It should only take them 5 or 10 minutes. We don't want this to be a big deal, or else no one will do it. They submit that form, we review it, we add our comments, and then we'll schedule a 15-minute meeting with them once a quarter. Again, it's just about keeping it super simple, but doing it regularly. Because what we found before we started doing that was you'd go 12 months without having a proper conversation with any of your key staff.
Yeah.
Um, and then we had someone leave, and they had a few issues, and they were a bit upset about a few things, and clearly had been playing on their mind for a long time. And that was such easy stuff. Like, yeah, it was just miscommunication because we hadn't sat down with them. So
Yeah.
we go for quarterly simple reviews rather than a big annual review that becomes scary for staff, dreaded by managers because it's going to be a big deal. So it's, yeah,
Yeah.
that's our approach to it.
I love the whole philosophy that you've got here that you're kind of weaving through. I'm interested to come back and check in with you in a year or two to kind of see how things are progressing. Like, I think quite possibly, like, your case study and story, yeah, could be very much along the lines of Diggy Doggy Daycare,
Yeah.
which was, you know, a tremendous outcome for the owner. I think it's a fantastic industry. You're baking systems thinking in from day one, and for all of those reasons I identified at the start, I think I can just tell that this is going to be a tremendous success for you. It's really just a matter of now sticking on the journey, staying on the path, and then taking the steps. Just maybe I don't know if you've got any final words for someone who's thinking about rolling out systemology in their business, or if there's any final words that you might be able to give to them if they're not quite sure if systems are the way, or if now's the right time, or it's, yeah, anything you might say to inspire them.
I think one of the other things I don't say to too many other people, but I'd say to other business owners is systems create value. And our IP is tremendously important at Pets in the City. But without, and I kind of view a business without systems, you've got nothing to sell.
Yeah.
So that's constantly at the back of my mind, that not that we want to sell Pets in the City. I want to grow to,
Yeah.
certainly spending the next at least 10 years in this business. But when we do eventually come to sell it, if we've got a rock star franchise system, it creates value. And also, I've got to stand in front of franchisees next year when we start franchising again quite aggressively, and I want to be really, really proud of what we're selling. And I think part of that is having a rock star franchise system. Without that system, it all falls over. So yeah, it's about, for me, a big part of it's about creating long-term value for the business as well.
Perfect. Well, we'll wrap it up there. I'll make sure I pop a link through to Pets in the City. So if anyone has an animal that they want
Yeah,
to
perfect.
put in your pet hotel, or
Yeah.
even just kind of watch what a systems driven company can do and watch your story as you begin to grow and scale. But just a huge thank you for being a great example for others.
Yeah, perfect. Absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed it.